again to an interesting session, which I'm sure it will be, of CII Startup Buzz. You're aware every Thursday at 5 p.m. sharp, we have Startup Buzz. And what we are trying to do at CII is ensuring that all of you founders, VCs, and anyone connected to the startup ecosystem gets all the knowledge and thought leadership required to have a successful startup. That's all we aim to do every Thursday. And this today's session will be moderated by Dilip Chandra, and the speaker will be Anurita Das. So thank you again for joining in. Dilip will take over from here. He'll introduce Anurita and ask her questions. At any time you want to ask any question, feel free to just post it on the chat. Dilip is the boss for the next 45 minutes. He'll take up the questions as and when he thinks fit. But don't wait till the end of the session or opening session. Anytime you feel, just post it and Dilip will take it. Remember, every Thursday, 5 p.m., Startup Buzz. Thank you for joining, and over to you, Dilip.
Thank you, Ninad, for that brief introduction. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CII Startup Bus. Today's a very, very interesting topic. I think that's something we've been hearing on Agentic AI. It's interesting because it's not as loud or flashy, yet it's quietly changing how enterprises or startups actually are working. And AI does not just does not assist, but also acts, making decisions on our behalf, executing important workflows behind the scenes very calmly. That's why I guess it's not flashy. But to help us cut through the hype and understand what this means, I'm delighted to welcome Anurita Das from Generation. Anurita, welcome. Great to have you with us. I'm really looking forward to this insightful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm also looking forward.
Great. Let's get started.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop in as and when we'll try and pick up. Cool. Anurita, opening with some context, right? To say the least, when we say agentic AI, know what fundamentally changes compared to traditional automation or Gen AI copilots that we've been hearing for the last 2 years. I think a lot of people in this call would have heard it, but this has become a quite revolution rather than a loud disruption. What do you have to say to that?
Well, first of all, I would like to start by saying that for some reason, a lot of people tend to have this perception that it is a very new technology. However, it is not. So that is the first thing. It has been around for more than 70 years already, ever since that paper published by Turing that asked the question, can machines think? And from there to here we are. With that said, what we understand as agentic AI, this coined term, is a class of artificial intelligence that can execute a task autonomously. Now, autonomous here being the key, because AI agents existed even before in the form of chatbots. You may have seen it in websites where you would go and book your flight tickets even before language models came to be. And those were also agents. However, they were not autonomous. They were very, very rule-driven, and every single statement was being mapped to an intention, and that was executing different functionalities, which is entirely automated in what we understand as agentic AI today.
No, very interesting. I mean, the fact that you mentioned it's been there around, and a common man like me or probably the audience only hearing it lately is an important, it is very interesting. So on that note, from your experience, Anurita, working with whether enterprises, big enterprises, startups, big or small, what are the early signs that tell you that an organization is either ready or not ready for this agentic AI adoption?
So first of all, I think that the first step of readiness, of course, there is the fact about data readiness. that is there. But even without that, for example, when we're implementing AI in certain areas, such as customer service, the data readiness requirement may not be as heavy to start with. You may only require the list of customers that you have and a place to deploy your agents on. That could be on a website or on a support ticket system that you're utilizing right now. Now, with that said, one very important thing is the psychological readiness of the organization to actually adopt AI. By what I mean by that is often there is an over reliance to the outcome, what AI can do, beyond what is possible in the AI. So there is an expectation of 100% automation or 90% automation, both of which are not possible. So that needs to be toned down. And when they have a realistic outcome, because if you're coming up with a 90% accuracy required for deployment, you're never going to deploy because that will never happen. So that is a very important point, that are they aligned to what is possible with AI? And then we go into the data readiness.
Certainly. I think there are already questions coming in, and one of them matches to my next question. Thank you, audience. Is this transformative technology, Aniruddha, for startups or big enterprises?
It's transformative for startups. Big enterprises, even more than big enterprises, it's transformative for startups. I'll tell you why. So before, let's say that if you wanted to actually produce something deep tech, an application, even if you had the idea, you would need to have a team to execute it. But now with different code execution agents out there, coding agents like Cursor, Lovable, the ones that you hear about, you may not get like a production ready version, but the time required to get to MVP is massively small right now. It's very small. You would probably need a week or two to get something up and running that you may call MVP. And I'm talking about just tech, but I'll also say even for non-tech. For example, let's say there is a brand and the brand requires a catalog of original products to start the sale, right? Or to start taking orders. Now they can generate that original catalog, which is happening. I mean, it's not great because in a lot of cases, what people buy and what they receive, and they end up becoming completely different. But the fact is you can be out there in the market at an extremely short period of time. For an enterprise, that is not possible.
Certainly. Slight digression, Aniruddha, I think is a very, interesting question. What is agentic AI in simple language?
Just a class of AI that can do a particular task without you setting a rule. So for example, if it's a coding agent that can code, you do not essentially need to tell it how to code what kind of programming language it should select to do something. It will start writing it. You don't have to always tell it the best practices. It will start to create that on its own. Although I would like to argue that you should tell it what to do, but I'll keep that out for now.
Good. Thank you for that. But that brings me to a very interesting, core of the conversation, right? The workflow transformation and why the major use cases of this transformative technology. So with that definition of agentic AI, I can only imagine the possibilities, right? So as per you, Aniruddha, which enterprise workflows are seeing the most immediate value from agentic AI today, whether it is operations, customer support, finance, supply chain, product, and any specific reasons of of this industry being the first?
So I believe there has been a PwC study published on this subject, and customer support by far is probably where the adoption really is. Not only because it's easy to implement there, I would say it's not that easy because of the compliances, but I personally believe it's probably because it's an area where chatbots were deployed in a huge number, even before the generative AI wave came. So customer support, customer success, these areas, they're heavily infested with agentic AI. It's filled with it. And sales and marketing are also easier areas where this is deployed. Like you would see posts on social media getting augmented, created, researched upon using a generative AI. And there are areas like operations is also there, but I would say it's still getting there. Still, the production level deployments are still taking time, not as out there compared to customer success or customer support or marketing per se. So yes, those are by far there. And sales is also seeing that, but I think it's still leaning towards marketing part of marketing and sales more, right, these days.
No, indeed. That brings me to a very important question. I'm sure a lot of the audience would love to hear your answer on this. How does it change the way we all work, right? How does agentic AI change the way work gets done, specifically on the decision making, the resources, human resources, right? That's a big question from the day AI has become a buzzword. Now with agentic AI, with a lot more things to be automated, uh, will there be accountability within the teams? So there are a lot of these questions, right? That would come with this transformative technology. What's your view?
So the way that we see things working may not be ideal, right? But it is the way it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how things are changing. I'm going to talk about how it differs from their perception of change. And then I'm also going to touch a little bit upon whether that is the ideal scenario, and if not, why. So the way that things are right now in customer support, you go on a website, you have a question, FAQ, and you receive a response from a retrieval augmented generation chatbot that was trained upon documents that you fed to it, essentially. And then it responds back. So your first level questioning is sorted there. No one has to pick up a call. You do not have to keep a person just to answer someone that, when are you open, for example? Do you sell this? And this is the easiest to deploy kind of chatbot, right? You just feed it some frequently asked questions about your business, have it deployed, boom, done. And there are a lot of players in this industry as well that gives you not very expensive chatbots. Now, this has certainly, this is very positive because it gives startups, smaller businesses scale. Now, there are other areas where things get implemented as well, right? As I've said, marketing. A lot of the marketing, it is AI driven. So you would see the same style of speaking in various posts across various brands. It's like the same person has written it.
Correct. Adaptations.
Yes, and like ChatGPT has a particular way of writing things. It has its own voice, and Claude has its own voice. So when you see, it's all very typical. The brand voice is sort of lost. Like you don't just go that, this brand is bold right now because it's all flattened in a way. That is there. Another is the ideal scenario would be that you give a command to AI and it does everything for you. From the leadership's perspective, that is the way it should be, at least. I mean, different opinions from the different departments, obviously. But in reality, that never happens because once again, that 90% or 100% automation is not possible because of the nature of the technology. AI, generative AI does not know or care about what is the truth. It only cares about guessing the next token correctly in a way that mimics thinking.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And please go ahead, Anurita.
Yes. So uh, there is this gap that exists between this. So the ideal scenario would still be you get something from AI, you revise it, give feedback, go back and forth. But that might not always be happening, but certainly is changing the way we are doing things. We are also trusting AI a lot. That is for sure. It's something that I see.
Which brings me to a very, very important question. You brought up the right keyword, trust, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Trust, along with that, the keywords like control and governance. Probably the higher you go from an organization strength perspective, or the bigger the organization, whether it's startup or enterprise. I think these are very important keywords as we grow, right? And today's leaders, I'm sure, have a concern about or concern on the loss of control. How do you think, organizations design, have to design guardrails, Anurita, so that these agents act autonomously, but yet remained aligned with business intent and risk tolerance?
Mhm. There are a lot of prompt level guardrailing that is happening. That when the AI starts talking about a particular subject, don't speak about this, don't speak about this, or keyword related guardrailing that is happening. But I've seen that both of those can fail depending upon which AI it is. It can have, it can simply ignore that guardrail, especially AI, they have a context limit. So it can only process a certain number of words. Let's say that if it has a limit of 100,000, and you're crossing in the 90,000 or even 80,000 or 75,000 range, the chances that your guardrail is going to fail is higher. So
Interesting.
It's important to have a completely different dedicated agent only to check whether the guardrail is getting adhered to or not, whether it's being ignored. That's very important. And that's the way at least we do it.
That was my next question, and you kind of answered it, right? Are there any governance models to keep a check on, the models that are already built, the workflows? I'll probably skip that. From a leadership standpoint, Aniruddha, I'm sure, irrespective of the size of the organizations, whether these are CIOs, founders, CTOs, business heads, they think about ownership of agentic systems. How should they think about, these agents from a IT business or hybrid model standpoint?
So this is a really interesting question because you would see that a lot of these initiatives are getting driven by the CXOs, right? However, the ones that are interacting on a day-to-day basis, unless it is a reporting specific agent, they are the other employees. They are not the CXOs. This governance model, responsibility, uh, getting into the familiar habit of always checking the output or always checking the output of the model that is judging the other model before implementing that is very important for everyone that's using the AI. And I believe it's a part of the disclaimer of every single agent or model that is out there. You cannot always expect truth. First of all, AI cannot say no. I mean, agents, generative AI cannot say no because saying no requires knowing what is yes. So unless specifically trained to do so, it's highly likely that it will never say no. The problem with that is a lot of things become blurry because of that. Ideation and areas that are like that, where yes and no would not really matter that much, and you're trying to come up with new ideas, they're not really related. I mean, it does not matter, correct?
Yeah.
However, things where you have to make judgments, where saying no is important and where saying no would actually be more important than saying yes, because you can call up risk by saying yes to different things like legal scenarios, compliance, and things like that. And it becomes very important that everyone in the organization, they're completely double, triple checking the output. Of course, they can always have another agent to make checking of that output easier for them, but the check needs to happen by everyone.
Which brings me to a very sensitive topic, the talent, the human resource, the implications of it, right? As these agents that you start referring to start executing these tasks, multi-step workflows, on top of it, another agent to validate these workflows, what happens to human roles, Anuradha? I think that's a concern a lot of us have. Where do you see jobs being augmented versus fundamentally redefined?
So coding is an area where I think a lot of job roles have already been fundamentally redefined, as you said. And in areas like customer support, like the first level customer support is something where the job roles have been fundamentally redefined as well already, even before generative AI became what we currently see it as. But for example, I think that, I mean, on the positive note, on a very positive note, in fact, being able to work in the loop with an AI and being able to validate its response and knowing how to validate and giving it an okay, go ahead on high stake decisions, I think it's going to get more and more important. And for that, I think, as humans, we are all judgmental by nature. So
True.
that very negative but uh, defensive tendency can really act. I mean, we might be requiring more and more of that skill.
Interesting. And what happens to human roles as a result of this? Do you think the jobs today that are there will be redundant and there'll be new jobs created, or there'll be efficiencies be kicked in?
I think it will be redefined, right? The job roles. Organization, they may choose to rename it that the job role in order to redefine it, but the jobs aren't changing. What you need for an organization remains the same. How you're getting things done are changing, and what you're doing to get that done is changing. Also, one single person in an organization is hitting a much higher scale than they would have before the agentic AI or generative AI era. So you have to know how
Certainly.
to work with minions.
Interesting. There's a good question and kind of aligns. I'll try and combine both from the audience poll as well, audience chat as well. What are the new skills that organizations still need to build internally, whether it is a product thinking, prompt policy, translation, or agent supervision? I mean, from a skill standpoint.
It's very interesting. I see it a lot that, I mean, those are all there. But how to write a proper prompt is something that, people still do not know. I mean,
Yeah. Tell me about it.
because you would still see people, they're very good at conversing with ChatGPT like it's a family member. Like, I'm pretty sure at this point, my family members are closer to ChatGPT than they're with me. Like, but when you actually need to get something done using a generative AI model, right? You would want to give prompts in a certain way, like how it should act, what it should check, does it need to think, rethink? twice or thrice before giving the answer. I think that a lot of people, even though it's very easy to learn, they're not essentially learning that basic part. So that is really the first step, because when you know how to prompt, even the basic ones, is when you know how to use your minions at work.
True. From an organization perspective, Aniruddha, measuring value and ROI becomes, inevitable at some point, right? While this could be a phase where it's getting experimented, this transformative technology that we are speaking about, eventually businesses, small or big, want to measure value, right? So that the time and cost investment that goes into it has to make an ROI sense. So from that standpoint, traditional AI ROI is often measured in efficiency. And how do you think organizations should rethink ROI for agentic AI from a standpoint of speed, quality, resilience,
Mhm.
or even the revenue impact?
Well, the usual measurements, everyone is familiar with that, like the efficiency and the resources saved, etc. But I think that's a very narrow way of looking, might be a narrow way of looking at it. Because, for example, when agentic AI impacts ideation, let's say, that you are a brand that is coming up with different skincare products, right? And because you are utilizing agentic AI, that tells you how you can repurpose existing tested FDA approved drugs, how you can combine them to perhaps come up with, look for newer combinations, perhaps search for a vendor in a different country that can white label a particular combination to you, and how that has impacted the different research papers related to that, right? And this impact isn't really efficiency gain. It's really transformative for the business. And for example, they can perhaps come up with several new products which can increase their investment in the short term, but can start increasing their earning from the next year. So it also increases the reach and of the business itself, of the entire field that they can play in as well, especially in ideation like this. It cannot exactly be measured in this efficiency gain or how much money you've saved, because you might not be saving more money, you might be taking more risks, in fact.
Makes sense. Are there any examples where organizations underestimated the downstream impact? I know it could be very early because these learnings come over time. So underestimating the downstream impact, whether it is in a positive or negative way of deploying these autonomous agents at scale.
Oh, could you give me like examples so I can form it as well?
Sure. So maybe in the case of the skincare brand that you refer to, they have implemented it, but they have not really estimated the outcome of this particular model, right? The autonomous workflow that is built. Uh, it could be in a good way, it could be in a bad way that led to a customer escalation or large size of customers giving either positive or negative feedback. So have you seen across any such examples, Aniruddha, where organizations have implemented this and there is feedback that has come in a good or bad way?
Hmm. No, there has been a lot. I mean, this particular skincare brand that I'm talking about, this brand is not Indian. And I have seen that they have increased their research reach and their product lineup using AI. Very interestingly, using ChatGPT.
Nice.
I mean, they were not even going out there and researching PubMed. They're just on ChatGPT trying to understand different ingredients. And it's a brand with a, it's not a huge brand, but still over 50 million USD revenue. So not like a great number of employees. So to them it's great, and to them it had a very positive impact. They know what to go for next year. Without agentic AI, they maybe would have had to hire someone just for R&D. In a lot of markets, that's very costly, especially because in a lot of regions, you can't exactly fire people or hire people that easily. So it's not a quick call to take. So that for them is a lifesaver. So the investment they're making might be making them burn more, but immediate impact is the fact that they did not have to go for a whole um, researcher to hire a researcher, and to do that initial R&D, they can see what are the potential drugs that they can repurpose. This is one example. Another
Interesting.
very negative one would be, if I were to give a negative example, that like there are a lot of retail brands out there. I mean, if you go on YouTube, you're going to see influencers buying AI generated dresses.
Tell me
Obviously,
about it.
so obviously retailers are not saying that, okay, this image is generated by AI, but anyone that's looking at it can tell that it's generated by AI. So then they buy it. So obviously, they could end up buying what seems like unicorn, but what they might have at home is a duck. So that is certainly negative.
It's fascinating. So with any technology, there is always, risks that are associated. There are reality checks. There are, I'm sure, lessons will be learned over time. While it's at the start of, a new wave, uh, what are the most common mistakes, Andrita, you feel organizations make while deploying agentic AI, way too early or way too aggressively?
Trusting too much is the biggest issue. So for example, I'll give an example in coding. And so MVPs with uh, tools like Lovable or Cursor, right? Um, it may feel like it's production ready. But when you go into the actual tools, you will see a massive number of issues, that it's written in a way where it has not been, the files have not been segregated correctly. So once you start to scale, you're going to crash. Too many functions written in a single file. Once again, when you scale it, you're going to die while debugging as the features build up. And even if you tell it to do all of these, it may, for example, you already have a part of a feature existing in a particular file, and you expect the agent to understand that. It reads from it, but it doesn't know that it's there, so it should write there. It creates a different file with a slight variation. So now you have two. So imagine this in a really high scale. Another thing is, for example, you have a great design of a product, a garment, and you create a whole portfolio with this. Now the order is coming. You see that this is not really, this field is not possible at all because of the laws of physics
Hmm.
and the material that are available. There have been issues where there were lawsuits in the United States, several ones, and because the lawyer in question has quoted a case that simply did not exist. But it sounded like, it sounded like something that would, but it did not. So trusting too much is a huge issue. Don't trust. Just, know the tool, know the limitations, and use it.
So that's a wise, thought, right? As simple as it might sound. I think coming from somebody who's been there and done that or seeing it on a daily basis, it means a lot to us. Thank you for that. Uh, what does the future hold, right? The future of how does the next 2 year, 2 to 3 years looking from this transformative technology of agent AI? What will enterprise workflows look like when agentic AI becomes mainstream rather than experimental, which is what the current phase is?
Hmm. So right now, as I've said, that there is a lot of adoption in customer success. Strangely, I say strangely because it is an area uh, very closely governed by a lot of privacy policies and different data protection laws. across the globe, right? Even in India with DPDP. And but it is one of the highly adopted areas. But we're still not seeing the impact in areas where it could bring a lot larger impact. I'll give you a quick example. Like, for example, in case of research papers, because the understanding capability of agentic AI when it comes to charts and graphs can be limited. So structured data that comes in an unstructured format can be limited. You essentially cannot extract that information out easily. There could be wrong co-linking of the information. So, but if we were to implement an agentic AI that could help dig research papers, which we are doing, that is a massive area of impact. Because for a human being to go through like 10,000 research papers, it's something thinkable, right? But for an
True.
agent, that is possible within a few minutes. So these are the areas where we are going to see, once people understand the limitations, the guardrails, and not, right now people get very shocked because they have this very, very beautiful idea about what life will look like once agentic AI is adopted. And when that does not show up, right? So it's a journey of diminishing expectation. So once that expectation is diminished to a realistic level, and we see a lot of these high stake agents getting rolled out to the field because people know how they can govern these AIs. And hopefully by then people are familiar with how to work with an AI in a pod. We see this high impact areas are going to get more and more adoption, where the biggest, I think, game changer for an AI is the fact that it has it has understanding of unstructured data, a format that most of our data is in today.
True.
So that is, we are going to see rollouts in those areas. And probably I have seen studies where they say that by 2028 or so, you're going to see like 15% interference or implementation in decision making with AI, agentic AI.
No, that's a very important insight. I think, it shows us what lies ahead, exciting it at the same time, experimental, so mixed emotions.
I think it was posted in Reuters in June of 2025 or something like that, where they were saying that in decision making, AI is still not up there, right? 0 or 1% barely. So they're expecting it to go up to 15 by 2028.
Wow. If you have to give this audience, participants of the startup community in this room, one piece of advice, what should be the first practical step they should take in the next 90 days to prepare for this transformative technology, agentic AI?
So obviously, learn how to prompt. Number 2, learn what to not trust. Try to stress test the system with reality so that you yourself can understand the limitation. So you'll see, always try to create a chain of conversation, right? So for
Right.
example, once you have like 2 chats back and forth, it's not going to lose itself that much. Once you have 20, things are going to go haywire at that point. So 20 to 100, things are going to go different. So try to aim for that, because if you are, if it's a startup that is trying to implement AI in one of its processes, and you do not want to depend entirely on the vendor or the consultant, whoever is implementing it, then it's a good idea to also keep an expectation that that if you can implement this much is the outcome that you can potentially have, and not chase an unreal expectation that you will never get. So understanding that, interacting with AI overall, try to get it to finish tasks as opposed to just chatting with it and just writing email or writing posts. Try to make it do more things, That is, I think, very important.
No, very true. Couldn't agree, with you more. Like any new technologies, I think take the baby step, you know, iterations, learn, fail, and then
Yeah,
adapt. Right? So
yeah,
true. Probably we can take up some, audience questions, Amrita.
would be
Right?
very happy to.
I think there's an interesting question that kept repeating from a bunch of audiences. How do we build an agent? You know,
Hmm.
as basic as that. I think a bunch of people who asked. And
So,
then just to on a funnier note, somebody said, "Is it rocket science?" So,
no, it's very easy actually. So, so there are platforms like N8N or even our platform where you can go and deploy agents. You have to chain the story that what the agent should be doing. But I think that's overcomplicating stuff, like way too overcomplicating. The simplest form of agents can simply be connected with Zapier or something like that.
hmm,
You know a little bit of coding, it's very easy to create an agent because then you can just, it's very easy to create an agent, not because you have to code, because then you can tell ChatGPT or something to give you a single Python file with an agent written into it, and you can then deploy it. However, for a person who does not know coding, I think it's better to go for pre-deployed agents. And trust me, at this point, there is an agent for everything.
interesting. I mean, that brings me to an interesting question. Uh, One workflow you would never fully automate with agents as on today.
Hmm. Decision to say no.
Still very much human, is it?
So, I mean, I wouldn't say that, you know, a lot of us are socially anxious. So it's not that we ourselves know how to say no very well, but it's just that
So true.
uh, the rules do not apply when it comes to generative AI. So even though it shows that it's thinking a lot, it is not. So it can adhere to maybe one or two rules at the same time.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What is the one myth about agentic AI that you'd like to bust?
Well, there are quite a lot actually. But first of all, the fact that it's going to take up all jobs and stuff like that. I mean,
Hmm, important one.
mm, it's another thing is because AI, oh, this is the, okay, this is the most important one, I think. Another thing is because AI is doing X today, it will be doing, I don't know, 100X tomorrow. The scale up is not linear. It can flatten, it can, just slow down. It happens all the time, even when you're training machine learning models, that,
Right.
till a curve, till maybe 80%, you are very fast. And post that, you're literally, I don't know, a snail trying to climb a mountain. And it's not that just because it is at a particular intelligence level compared to 1 year before, does not mean it will be the same again tomorrow. That gap might require a longer time to scale up. So that is another myth.
No, really appreciate that. Probably one last question that I'd like to pick up is the trends to watch out for in, 25, 26. I guess you kind of answered that, but if there are larger trends for this community or in general industries to watch out for.
Hmm. So I think a lot of skepticism is appearing right now in agentic AI implementations. I would argue that it is healthy.
Hmm,
And I don't think anything should be accepted without testing. So uh, right now, the skepticism that is appearing from a lot of studies, whether it's MIT or somewhere else, and it is essential And the newer threats that are appearing with, AI just connecting and interacting with a lot more technologies, whether it is AI interacting with IoT or AI potentially having information of uh, private data and what can be done with that. This kind of skepticism, it's probably going to grow quite a bit as people come to understand the technology more and more. And it is very important that everyone tries to understand it, that, what other kind of risk could it potentially have, right? And if it's a startup that is trying to adopt agentic AI into one of its core processes, it's a part of its tech stack, for example, not over-promising at this point would be very important. So maybe 2 years back, you could still overpromise and get away with it, but now would be a very difficult time to overpromise.
The reality is kicking in.
Yes, yes. So people are, I think, just overall more skeptical.
That's fantastic advice. What I clearly see, Anruta, is it's not agentic AI isn't about futuristic promises, right? It's already happening. It's changing. The work around us, under the feet, like the quicksand, they say, right? Things are happening under our feet, around us, and the way work's gonna change. You've beautifully put across how the landscape will change, uh, present, future, right? Thank you very much, Anruta, for this grounding conversation in reality and
Thank
telling
you.
us not to trust agentic AI yet, not fully. And thanks to the CII Startup Bus audience, guys. Startups and enterprises alike, the opportunity is now to experiment early with this transformative technology and, most importantly, build responsibly, right? Every week, CII Startup Bus, guys, every Thursday, 5 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, Aniruddha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.